Hi Math 5-4. This is the video for lesson 114, which is located on page 529 of your textbook and is scheduled for April 16th, which is a Thursday. Go ahead and do your time test H, which is multiplication. It's located on page 223 of your test and worksheet booklet, and have your parents grade that for you. And then we'll get started on the lesson. Today's lesson is dealing with simplifying fractions. It sounds maybe a little intimidating. That word simplifying is a big word, but I promise you it's a lot easier than it sounds. Simplifying is a fancy word for just changing the fraction. So we're going to look at a couple rules for simplifying fractions. All right, the first one, get down to there. Okay, the first rule is whenever we do our math and we end up with an improper fraction as our answer. Remember, an improper fraction, the numerator is larger than the denominator. We write an improper fraction as a mixed number or whole number. For example, if we got 4/3 here as our answer, that's improper because 4 is in the numerator, 3 is in the denominator, so 4 is larger than 3. That's an improper fraction. We would do our division to divide out 4 divided by 3, and we would end up getting our answer, which 1 times 3, may not have enough room, 3, and a remainder of 1. We put our remainder over our divisor and end up with 1 1/3. So the first rule, anytime you get an improper fraction as your answer, in general, you should change that over to a mixed number or a whole number, okay? It's pretty simple. We've done that many times before already. Our second piece, our second rule that is a good general rule with fractions is always reduce your fractions when possible. So say you've added some fractions or subtracted some fractions and your answer was over here 5/10. If this is the answer you got, we look at 5/10 and we know that it's not in its lowest reduced form, where you need to reduce it to 1/2. So we do that by looking at the 5 and the 10 and figuring out, can I reduce them? Well, 5 is divisible by 5 and 10 is divisible by 5. So let's check that out. So if I divide 5 by 5, I get 1. And if I divide 10 divided by 5, I get 2, 1/2. And 1/2 can't be reduced anymore because the only thing a 1 and a 2 can both be divided by is 1. So it is in its lowest lowest numbers for the fraction. Okay, so write an improper fraction into a mixed number or whole number and always reduce your fractions. That is what this lesson is going to give you good practice at. So let's look at some examples. We come down here and we have an addition problem. For this addition problem, it's 2/3 plus 2/3. Remember, when I am adding my fractions, my denominator is the same, so I don't do anything to it when I'm adding. I just copy it over here, and I add my numerator. So 2 plus 2 gives me 4. Okay, and we know that that's an improper fraction because the numerator, 4, is larger than the denominator, 3. And I can look back up here, and we've already done the work, so we know that that's rule number 1 applies. This improper fraction has to be changed to a mixed number or a whole number, and in this case, it's going to be changed to a mixed number. So my answer would be 1 1/3. So that is applying rule number 1 to an addition problem for fractions. Okay? Let's look at another example, which I think is my last one on this page. So I have the subtraction problem, 6 5/8 minus 1 3/8. So let's go through. When we do these, we can cover up the whole number to start with, because that's not what we're starting with. And so now, 5/8 minus 3/8, when I'm subtracting or adding fractions, if my denominators are the same, I'm good. I just copy that down. Okay, go ahead and put my fraction bar. Now I know I'm subtracting, so I can subtract my numerators. 5 minus 3 gives me 2/8. So now I'll move on to my whole number. 6 minus 1 is 5. So I have a mixed number, and it should seem like, oh, maybe I'm done. But my problem isn't with my mixed number in general. My problem is that 2/8 here can be reduced. So we have to do something to it. So the 5 is fine as it is. The 2/8 though, 2/8 can be reduced. Both 2 and 8 can be divided by 2 to make them a smaller number. So 2 divided by 2 gives me 1, and 8 divided by 2 gives me 4. So my answer would actually be 5 1/4. I just simply left 5 alone, but I reduced the fraction piece of my mixed number. Okay? So this would be the correct answer. If you answered it like this, it's not in its lowest form. So it really wouldn't be the right answer. Okay? We would need it in its lowest form. So that kind of takes in, let's see, that one, it messes with mixed numbers, but it mostly is rule number 2 to reduce, which let me pull that back on screen, to reduce your fractions when possible, even if it's just a piece of a mixed number to reduce. Okay? So let's look at another example. In this example, it's another mixed number addition, and this one's an addition problem. So I'm going to go ahead and cover up what I don't need to mess with quite yet and look at my fractions I'm adding. So I have the same denominator, so I can just copy that down. Don't have to do anything there. Now, when adding fractions, I can add my numerator. 3 plus 4 gives me 7. Okay, and now I can work with my whole numbers. 5 plus 6 is 11. So if I look at this, my answer is 11 7/5. Well, that looks kind of odd because here by itself, I have an improper fraction, 7/5. So I'm going to have to do something with that. So when I look at 7/5, I can turn it into a mixed number because rule number 1 told me I should always write my improper fractions as a mixed number. So let's do that. So that's 7 divided by 5. 7 divided by 5. Okay? So I know that 7 divided by 5, the closest I can get without going over is 1. 1 times 5 is 5. Subtract 7 minus 5 and I get 2. And when I do my answer, I take my quotient with my remainder of 2 over my divisor of 5. Okay? So that is what 7/5 turns into. But over here, I have 11 still to deal with. And then I have almost like I'm saying plus 1 2/5. It is what I'm saying. It's not almost. It is what I'm saying. I took my 7/5 and I turned that into 1 2/5. I have my 11 that just copies straight down. Now I have to add these two together because I have a whole number plus a mixed number. Okay? So when I do that, I have no fraction piece to add, so no fraction piece here, so 0 plus 2/5 would be 2/5, and 11 plus 1 is 12 2/5. So that is my answer. So when I get a whole number plus an improper fraction, I leave my whole number alone for a minute, turn my improper fraction into a mixed number, and then add it back to my whole number to get my final answer. Okay. Let's look at this one. All right, I'm going to cover up my, well, I'll just cover it with my fingers. How about that? I'm going to cover up my whole numbers for now because I don't need them quite yet. My denominators are the same. My common denominators, that when they're the same or equal, that's called common. So I'm just going to copy that down as my denominator. Then I'm going to add my numerator. 1 plus 2 is 3. And then I can come over here and I can add my whole numbers. 3 plus 4 is 7. So now I have 7 and 3/3. 3/3 is an improper fraction also. So I know that I can just copy this 7 straight down. And I know that 3/3 is equal to 1. Because if I had a circle and I divided it into 3 pieces, that's what my denominator tells me, how many pieces to divide it into. And my numerator tells me how many of those to shade. My numerator tells me to shade 3 out of the 3 pieces. I would have 1 whole shaded. So I know that that's equal to 1. And my answer, 7 plus 1, would be 8. Okay? So for this lesson, 114, your practice problems are on page 530. And there will be a video for lesson 115 and 116 coming soon.